It's like there's a meta question that no one is looking at, which is that without mind, you don't even have your evolutionary theory, folks.
Well, and there's another cut on this that I think is relevant to argument that we've developed, and that is that the evolutionary explanation for the origin of animal body plans, the origin of new forms of life, the origin of the first life, is always rendered as a strictly materialistic theory that does not have any place for it, no place in it for mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not because there's no evidence of mind in the natural world, or no evidence of mind having acted in the past in the natural world, but rather it's a methodological choice. It's a choice of method from the outset. And there's actually a principle that evolutionary biologists affirm, as do many scientists today. And they say that if you're going to be a scientist, you must limit yourself to strictly materialistic explanations for everything, even the origin of life, the origin of the universe, the origin of consciousness, the nature of consciousness.
As they write it in a book, which is
Well, and
amazing.
there's the principle is so common that it has a name. It's called methodological naturalism,
Yeah.
or methodological materialism. And part of what we're challenging in our work on intelligent design is that principle, the idea that that should be normative for science. It wasn't normative during the period of the scientific revolution. You found that Kepler, Boyle, Newton, and many others made design arguments right in the context of their scientific work. They saw evidence of design in nature and they talked about it. And they made arguments about why what they saw was best explained by a designing intelligence. That move, that inference, has been ruled out of court since the late 19th century, but in post-Darwinian evolutionary biology. But that means, and this was part of the Nagel concern, that means we're putting blinders on ourselves as scientists and philosophers. We're saying, hear no design, see no design, even if there's very evident, if there's powerful evidence of design. And so the question, I think, for the scientific atheist is what best explains, open-ended question, what best explains, not what materialistic explanation best explains, but what explanation best explains things like the fine-tuning, things like the circuitry in cells, things like the digital code in DNA, things like the whole information processing system in life, things like the circuitry that we find controlling animal development. These are features which in any other realm of experience would immediately awaken an awareness of the activity of a mind antecedently in the past. So if you find, I could show you a wonderful picture of the circuitry that controls animal development. It's called a developmental gene regulatory network. When the scientists at Caltech mapped this out, the way that genes and gene products interacted to control the way cell division occurred and the way different gene products were expressed at different times as the organism was going through cell division from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, etc. They mapped out these relationships between the genes and the gene products, controlling the expression of genes at just the right time, in just the right place, in just the right cells and cell types. They mapped it out and it looked like a circuit, like an integrated circuit. Only it wasn't a circuit controlling the flow of electricity as much as it was controlling the flow of information. Look at that, and you look at that, and then they discovered something else, that the circuits, the systems, the molecules that are part of this system are, the system cannot be perturbed without shutting down animal development. These developmental gene regulatory networks are immutable, essentially immutable, a little bit around the margins, but very little, which means that if you want to get a new animal form from an old animal form, you've got to change the developmental gene regulatory network. But that's the one thing we know empirically you can't do. And so this presents a fundamental challenge to all forms of evolutionary theory as theories of the origin of new body plans. What has to be explained, the origin of life. And yet we look at that circuit and we say, wait, I've seen that before. I've seen systems that have that characteristic, and they're always the product of engineers. So we're looking at a feature which in any other realm of experience would immediately trigger the awareness of an activity of a mind. We're also looking at a system that poses a fundamental impediment to the adequacy of evolutionary theories for the origin of major innovation in the history of life, the origin of body plans. So you've got one paradigm failing, and we've got evidence that very powerfully points in a design direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to consider that maybe mind ought to be part of our theories of origin again.
Yeah. Have you dealt with some of the panpsychist ideas, because that seems to also be a way to answer, I had a discussion with Bernardo Kastrup and a few other people that posit the notion of mind as, even being close to even being an idealist, where basically he encapsulates all of materiality within mind in order to account for that problem. But what's interesting about people like Kastrup and a lot of the panpsychists is that they don't necessarily attribute mind in the way that, let's say, a Christian or a monotheist would, as a transcendent absolute origin of all patterns, let's say, but rather as this kind of amorphous, this amorphous thing that is there, that is part of the material world, and is
it's coextensive with matter and all matter, even what Newton called brute matter, atoms and molecules. And so there are a number of things to say about that. I address it in my most recent book, Return to the God Hypothesis. Panpsychism, first of all, doesn't do a very good job of explaining the evidence of design we have from the very beginning of the universe. Those fine-tuning parameters are set right from the beginning, and they seem to require an antecedent cause, which is not the universe, but which can explain the structure of the universe as a whole from the beginning. So that if the mind that the panpsychists affirm is coextensive with matter, you find this also in pantheism. You've got a little bit of a problem, because you need a cause that is sufficient to produce the effect in question, and the cause must be in some way separate from the effect, and they want to invest all of mind in the materiality of the physical universe. And yet the nature of the evidence of design, the evidence of mind we have, is present from the beginning and seems to require something outside the system to explain its origin. Secondly, I would say that investing mind in inanimate objects does not really pass the test of experience. We know of minds because of our internal self-conscious awareness of our own powers as agents. We have introspective awareness of our minds, and we therefore know something about what they can do. To impute those same powers to a table or to a rock seems to be a stretch. I don't think we have good reason to believe that those entities have minds. Now, you might want to say that there's a mind behind quantum mechanical phenomena, but I think that takes you in the direction of a transcendent mind, not in the direction of saying that there's a mind in every particle or in every immaterial object. There's something, when we think of mind and we want to invoke mind, we're invoking it based on our own introspective awareness of what it means to have a mind. We have an awareness of what a mind is because of our being our being minds and using minds. And that's what we really mean by mind. So we end up equivocating when we want to say a rock or a planet has a mind as well.
I mean, that's intuitively, obviously, that makes sense to me also, because we kind of understand mind as an active constraint over materiality. It's like that's how we actually experience mind as being. And so, for example, Bernardo Kastrup's theory is wild, but it's an interesting provocation to that idea, is that his idea is that all of the world is actually a form of dissociation. He almost sees it as a kind of disease. It's almost like a Gnostic way of thinking, where, there's this unitary mind and then it starts to break apart, and that all the aspects of the world are actually a form of dissociation and lack of memory, you could say, of being part of the original mind, and that's why they perceive themselves or they exist independently from the original mind. And so I find it to be a
That's
very dark
interesting.
way of thinking.
I'd say the panpsychists are getting warm.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
They've moved from the simplistic materialism that has dominated science, philosophy, and the academy, and much of culture for the last 100 years. And they're saying, no, there's a third fundamental reality. There's matter, there's energy. What in science I think people are coming to is there's a third fundamental reality in the sense that there's mind, or sorry, there's matter, there's energy, and there's information.
Information. Yeah, I've heard
And I
some
think
of the
what
New
we
Ageists
know
say
from our
that.
experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning, is that information always comes from a mind.
That's right.
And then I think you get into a more philosophical discussion with panentheists, panpsychists, and others who want to say that mind is fundamental or a fundamental reality, or straight up idealists who want to deny the materiality of the world. And I think there the Judeo-Christian worldview has the balance right, that matter and energy are real, space and time are real, but so is information. In the beginning, after all, was the word.
Mm-hmm.
You get this idea biblically. And even when you were talking about the Genesis account, I'm again stipulating theory of intelligent design is not based on a reading of Genesis, but it is interesting to me as a person who's both an intelligent design theorist and also a religious believer that the biblical text in the creation account repeatedly says, affirms that, and God said. The agent of creation is the word. It is information.
But not just that. It's more than that, because God says, God sees, and God evaluates. That's what he does during all of Genesis 1.
Interesting.
And so that's what mind is. Mind is basically giving a pattern of constraint, right? And then let's say calling that the multiplicity into that constraint and evaluating the distance between the participation and the constraint. Like that's how we live. That's how all our lives are
That's
made.
interesting, Jonathan. Yeah, he's taking stock of information, or he's taking in information to take stock of a situation and then acts accordingly by imparting new information.
By evaluating, saying that it is good. It's like,
Yeah.
naming, evaluating, and then judging. It's like, that is the greatest way of understanding mind. And I think, like you said,
it seems like a very simplistic story that can be read at a very simple level, but there are very profound things going on there from the standpoint of philosophy, engineering, science, epistemology. Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
I definitely think that Genesis 1 is the best account of the origin of the world. It just happens to not be a scientific account. It's an account of the origin of the world in meaning, and how mind and meaning are the source of reality, and then everything else is downstream from that description.